Happy birthday to Hong Kong! In 1841, a troop of British soldiers landed in Hong Kong and raised the first Union Jack to claim it as a crown colony. On the coming 26th of January, Hong Kong will have her 118th anniversary. People are very excited about it, preparing plenty of food and balloons for a great carnival. No, that's not the case for Hong Kong. A city's anniversary is usually not that quiet, especially for an international city like Hong Kong. But, Hong Kong was colonized, and the ruling China regards it as the beginning of her 100 years of disgrace. And obviously, I made this video because I don't agree. When you say happy birthday to a baby child, sometimes you can't stop thinking about how her parents made this baby. But the more important thing is to bless and to wish her life like a legend. Hong Kong is a legend, and a legend usually has a lot of myths. So today, why not talk about these myths to celebrate Hong Kong's birthday in a quiet way? Myth 1. Just a barren rock. British used to describe Hong Kong as a barren rock, which existed only as Anyway, and they still chose Hong Kong as their new port because she had a deep water harbor surrounded by mountains. It helps protect ships during typhoons. Wait a minute, did those mountains suddenly show up in 1841? Hong Kong is next to Canton, today Guangzhou. Canton had long been an international trading city for more than 1,000 years. Millions and millions of ships kept coming in and out. It was like Eiffel Tower in the Orient, and this barren rock is just next to it. Can't you sell some souvenirs and make a living? And in fact, many residents did not just sell souvenirs. There were pirates and barbarian tribes, pirates, smugglers, pirates, farmers, pirates, and several military bases of Imperial China. And they usually had more than one job and swapped each other. Villagers did not mind selling water and supplies to smugglers and pirates, and of course the British Navy before and during the Opium War. When you question it in a nationalist way, please think about the social class of those residents first. Most of them were not able or not eligible to join imperial examination, which means they were regarded as the inferior in Imperial China. To them, Manchurian tax collectors were nothing closer to the later British officials. Myth 2. Golden Era. You may think the year 1841 started the golden era of Hong Kong. Well, the concept of a territory called Hong Kong began in 1841. However, the early Hong Kong was way different from what we are familiar with. It was more like port cities in the Caribbean pirate movies, dirty, chaotic, and dangerous. The British thought Hong Kong could secure their business around Canton, but they forgot the Treaty of Nanking also designated 5 cities to open for business, including Shanghai. Before that, Canton was the only city open to European. Business kept fleeing from Canton region to Shanghai. The economy of early Hong Kong was terrible and seemed to be doomed. Later on, Hong Kong discovered her greatest asset was not the mountains, but the Union Jack. While China faced numerous revolutions and wars, Hong Kong became a perfect shelter both in political and economic meaning. According to the first census in 1872, the male-to-female ratio of European community was 5:1, and that of ethnic Chinese was 7:1. More and more people moved to Hong Kong for a temporary stay, earned some money, and went back to their hometowns. Among those guests, some came to Hong Kong for more than money, like Dr. Sun Yat-sen, founding father of the Republic of China, Jose Rizal, Filipino national hero, Ho Chi Minh, founding father of communist Vietnam. This kind of free flow built Hong Kong to a special mixture of the East and the West. But this model also brought Hong Kong a huge crisis. After World War II, refugees escaping from communist China increased at an accelerating rate. Population soared 4 times in just 5 years, making severe shortage of all resources. Closure of the border in 1950 did not stop this trend. Millions of refugees still walked through military forbidden areas. Many were captured, shot by militia, or killed by sharks. Every day, this tiny colony was running against time for enough water and shelter. But this collapsing city was still a paradise for refugees. People could at least survive here, and the other side was death. This common memory of Hong Kong people started to shape a special mandate for colonial government. You don't have to be democratic, you don't have to provide welfare, you just have to be ABC. Anything but communist. After this chaotic period, Governor MacLehose of the 70s introduced comprehensive reform, including housing, agency against corruption, education, metro system, rural development, etc. He was the one starting the golden era of Hong Kong, 130 years after 1841. Myth 3. A Chinese city. In the pre-modern era, a person may recognize himself as a farmer, a member of a clan, a resident around Canton, but hardly a citizen of a sovereign state. People practiced their own traditions, and there was no need to be identical to Beijing. A set of Legos can form a house or a boat. So do nation building. A category called Sinosphere existed, but the Chinese nation was yet to come. And Chinese in Hong Kong went through a different journey due to the British. Like other colonies, the British did not adopt an assimilation policy in Hong Kong. Instead, they enforced British-style law on non-Chinese residents and Great Qing legal code on ethnic Chinese residents. A European murderer would be executed by hanging, whereas a Chinese murderer would face decapitation. The last Qing code in Hong Kong expired in 1971, 60 years after the collapse of the Qing Empire in the mainland. Such philosophy appeared all along Hong Kong history. In the 1920s, the new culture movement in China eradicated the old culture and started a party-state era. However, Governor Clementi invited former imperial scholars to Hong Kong and revived classical studies. Traditions and worship activities in Hong Kong farming clans were preserved under the same principles. Women were not allowed to inherit land until the 1990s. Governor Grantham said in his memoir, "The new territories is almost more Chinese than Chinese itself." During modernization in the 19th and 20th century, people had their own way to digest Western impact and transform tradition. And not a surprise, Hong Kong absorbed more liberal thought and constructed a different modern model. Especially this place always attracted opponents of the current Chinese authorities, since the Qing Empire to Red China. Beijing thinks national security law is not stricter than colonial Hong Kong, but the mandate at that time was to prevent communists not to uphold it. Beijing thinks basic law is to bind people and they can interpret it in a favorable way since China is a unitary state, while the constitutional document has been assumed to bind the two governments and no side can unilaterally change it like federalism. Cantonese was not brought by the British, but could Beijing allow it as an exception from national standard? The story of Hong Kong does not end here. Since the pirates and the refugees, Hong Kong is never free from turmoil and crisis. Even one day, Hong Kong would dissolve and completely lose her identity. But we will still remember 118 years ago, on 26th of January 1841, a Union Jack changed the fate of a corner between ocean and the vast sky.